All right, welcome Algebra 2 students to Chapter 4, Sections 3. This is solve x squared plus bx plus c equals 0 by factoring. So you're basically solving quadratic equations that are equal to 0, and you're going to solve them by something called factoring. So let's go over a few vocabulary words first. Back from the words to review, monomials are terms, we'll say equations or expressions with only one term. So the expression 3x squared, that is one term. This is a monomial. A binomial is an expression with two terms. So x plus 3, those are two terms. A trinomial, I bet you can guess at this point, is an expression with three terms. So you would have an x squared plus 2x plus 1. All right, a quadratic equation is an equation written like this. So ax squared plus bx plus c. So it has to have one variable here, an x variable. It has to have a squared. That's the highest exponent, and everything else has to be fairly nice looking. So roots of an equation are basically the solutions, and zeros of a function basically the same thing. They are the solutions. All right. So what you're going to be given for this lesson, you're going to be given something like x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. You're going to be asked, what are the roots of this function? Or what are the zeros? Or what are the solutions? It can ask you the same question many different ways, but it means the same thing. So we're going to learn by factoring. Now, these are I'm going to actually use the word easier factoring because this right here, a is equal to 1, is easier to factor. It is easier to factor. And so what you do is you want to take this and you want to make it look like, go from standard form to intercept form, where m times n is equal to b, or c, I mean, and m plus n is equal to b. So basically, you want two numbers here that when you multiply them together gives you -8. That when you add them together gives you +7. So what this table sets up for you, this is something that once you do enough of them, you'll be able to do in your head very, very quickly if you know your factors. But these are factors of -8. Well, -1 times 8 is -8. 1 times -8. Those are two possibilities. -2 times 4 and 2 times -4. These are all of the possibilities of mn and m plus n. So once you know m and n, add them together. This becomes 7. This becomes -7. This becomes 2. This becomes -2. So please notice that when m equals 1, negative 1, and n equals 8, so that when you do this, you would put x minus 1, x plus 8. That's factored form. Now, once you factor this, once you put it in intercept form, actually, let's add a little thing here. Let's say that factored equals intercept form. All right, so make sure you have that part down somewhere in your notes. Right, but when we're here, let's FOIL again to see if what our answer was makes sense. So you've got x minus 1, x plus 8. You're going to do the first, x times x. You're going to do the outside. You're going to look at the inside numbers. And then you're going to look at the last numbers in each parenthesis. And combine like terms. And what do you got? Do you have what you started with? You do, so you should be happy that this is the factored form. So let's take a look at the guided practices. Number 1. Minus 18. And I'm going to go ahead and give you a few steps. All right. You saw how the example is here. These are Mr. Andre's steps. Number 1, I just want you to set up All right. So the first part here was to set up intercept form. So all you got to do is to begin with, just go ahead and set up intercept form. Then put variable as the first part of each parenthesis. So if you're using x, y, z, a, b, c, whichever variable you're using, you just put it in the front. Then think of all of the factors of c. So you take a look at negative 8 and just think of what the factors are. And when you get good at this, just by thinking up of all the factors, once you find a pair and you add them together, they should add up to b. So when I take a look at this first problem, step 1 is to set up intercept form. Step 2 is to put the variable in front of, at the beginning of each parenthesis. Then think of the factors of negative 18. Well, negative 1, 18, negative 2, 9, negative 3, 6. That's some of them. Now, let's add them together. Negative 1, 18. Put them together does not give you negative 3. Negative 2 plus 9 does not give you negative 3. Negative 3 plus 6 gives you positive 3. So, if it gives you positive 3, you can then assume that the 3 plus negative 6 would give you negative 3. And those are the numbers you use. Maybe I should add a step 5, which is to put those factors into intercept form. So, back to here, the factors that we're working with, 3, negative 6, so you put plus 3, minus 6, and you have factored it. Okay, look at number 2, n squared So, set up factored form, put the variables in the front, think of all the possible factors of 9. So 9 times 1, negative 9 times negative 1, 3 times 3, negative 3 times negative 3. Now, add them together. Well, that's 10, negative 10, 6, negative 6. None of them add up to negative 3. So once you've checked all the possible scenarios, you would say no solution or can't be factored. All right. Now there are some special patterns that will make it easier for you. One is called a difference of two squares. A squared with a difference of b squared. All you have to do, the middle part basically disappears. Or the middle part has disappeared. So all you do is you put a plus b, and then you put a minus b. This will make the middle term disappear. X squared minus 4, perfect square, perfect square. It's the difference of perfect squares, so it's x plus 2, x minus 2. X squared minus 16, perfect square, perfect square. X plus 4, x minus 4. That's how you factor these. I could give you x squared minus y squared. Well, that equals this first one, x times x plus y x minus y. Those are your, that's how you factor this. Perfect square, perfect square. Perfect square trinomial. What you're going to do is you look at perfect square again, perfect square again. If you see the perfect square here and a perfect square here, what you need to do is look to see what is the square root of b. So right here, it's a plus b. The square root of this one is 3, and 3 plus 3 is 6. So if you saw x squared minus 8x plus 64, well, perfect square, perfect square. So we're hoping that this is x No, not 64. I'm sorry, that's not what I want to do. Erase the 64. X squared minus 8x plus 16. So for this one, we're hoping that this is x minus 4 squared. And the reason we're hoping it's that is because the square root of 16 is 4. 4 plus 4 is 8. So for us, the square root of 16 is also negative 4, but we want a negative 8. So that's how it works out. Now, perfect square trinomial again. This is a perfect square. This is a perfect square. This time, though, it's a negative sign. So this would be a minus b squared. So another example of that. Oh, this is an example of that. It can be a plus b or a minus b and still get the same result. So let's take a look at these. All right, take a look. Perfect square, perfect square. It's the difference of two perfect squares. So basically, this is x squared minus 5 squared, which means this is x plus 5 and x minus 5. This is a perfect square trinomial. Here's a perfect square. Here's a perfect square. So, and it's a minus sign, so this should be m minus the square root of 121 is 11. And to check, you would look at the inside and say 2 times 11 is 22. So let's look at guided practice number 5. Number 5 is q squared minus 100. This is a perfect square. This is a perfect square. So it should be q, and it's the difference of a perfect square. So it should be q plus 10, q minus 10. Number 7. If you look at this, this is a perfect square and a perfect square. There's a middle term that's a minus. So that minus tells you that this is a w minus. And 81, the square root of 81 is 9 or negative 9. And which one do you double to get negative 18? You double this. So w minus 9 squared is a square of a binomial. All right, let's do the checkpoints. All right, factor this. So we need to think of, set up the problem, set up the factored form or intercept form. Put the variables out front, and now think of the factors of 12. 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4, and that's pretty much it. Do any of those add up to 7? Well, you know 12 and 1 don't, you know 2 and 6 don't. 3 and 4, absolutely. Plus 3, plus 4. That is now in factored form. Number 2, perfect square, perfect square. It's a difference. Since it's a difference of perfect squares, you should think it's x plus 9x minus 9. 9 times 9 is 81. X times x is x squared. The middle term cancels out. the zero product property. This is basically some logical stuff. If the product of two expressions is 0, then one or both of the expressions equals 0. If A and B are expressions and A times B equals 0, then A equals 0 or B equals 0. Basically, when you have factored form, you think to yourself, what makes this equal to 0? What makes this equal to 0? So then that means x is negative 5 or negative 2. This would be x equals negative 9 or 9. This would be x equals negative 3 or negative 4. So let's factor this. Set up the factored form. Put it in the variables in the front of the parentheses. Factors of negative 15 well, negative 1 with a negative 15 gives you negative 14. 3 with a negative 5 gives you a negative 2, which is exactly what we want. So we just go ahead and put in plus 3 and plus 5. So the zero product property says x plus 3, x plus 5 equals 0. Well, what makes this here equal to 0? So your roots are negative 3 like that. All right. Guided practice number 8. Solve the equation now. So what you've got here is x squared minus x minus 42 equals 0. Well, factors of 42, set up the factored form. Put the variables in the front. And then 1 times negative 42, and then 2 times negative 21, and then 3 times 14, negative 14, and then 4 doesn't work, 5, 6, 6 times negative 7. That's pretty much it. So which one of these, when added together, and you can do a lot of this in your head, but which one when added together gives you negative 1? And you should hopefully see right away that 6 and negative 7 give you the correct factored form. Since this is equal to 0, you say what makes this parenthesis equal to 0? What makes this parenthesis equal to 0? Negative 6 or 7. All right. This is called intercept form and factored form because that's what they are. The zeros are the intercepts and they are the solutions. So writing this in factored form should be x and an x and a minus 6 and a plus 6 and a minus 1. The zeros of the function are negative 6 and 1. Negative 6 is right here, 1 is right there. So then you can check. The graph passes through negative 6, 0, and 1, 0. Guided practice 11, and then it looks like we're almost done, is y equals factors of negative 30 are 1 and negative 30, 2 and negative 15, 3 and negative 10. 5 and negative 6. All right, we can stop there. Now, which ones add up to negative 7? 2 and negative 15? No. 1 and negative 30? No. 3 and negative 10. 3 minus 10. That equals negative 7. So, factored form. X plus 3 minus 10. That's our factored form. Set it equal to 0 to find the zeros for it. And you now know that negative 3 makes that equal to 0, or 10 makes it equal to 0. All right, finding the roots of the equation. Well, that means find the zeros. That means find the solutions. So we're going to factor this. Put an x here and an x here. In your head, you're going to think of all the factors of positive 2. That could be 1 times 2 or negative 1 times negative 2. Do any of those, when added together, give you negative 3? Well, you should see those are negative. So you would put in here a minus 1 and a minus 2. So my solutions, my roots, are 1 or 2. Find the zeros now. Remember, it's the same exact process, just said a different way. I'm going to set up my parentheses. I'm going to say the factors of negative 40 are negative 140, negative 220, negative 4 10, negative 5 8. All right, now which one adds up to a positive 3? Well, definitely not this one or this one. Negative 4 and 10, no, not this one. Negative 5, negative 8. When you add negative 5 together with a positive 8, you get positive 3. So my zeros are 5 or negative 8. All right. Good luck with the guided practices. I did quite a few of them for you. These will be the class problems we do in class. Good luck.